AITA for keeping my sister's secret. Names changed for privacy. Brace yourselves because this is a long one. I Linda 26F, my sister Stacy 23F and sister boyfriend John chapter 23M live together. Stacy and John met 3 years ago and now have a daughter who is 1 year old. Now it's important to say that I have a close relationship with John. I think of him as a brother and part of our family. He's a wonderful dad to my niece and he always supported them financially. But even I have to admit, he royally F up. Now on to what happened. Every summer John would go out of state to visit his family while leaving my sister at home. During this time he would be hanging around one of his female friends Heather 22F posting pictures on Facebook with her hanging all over him. My sister would rightfully be upset and would ask him to set boundaries with this friend, but John would always dismiss her feelings. Well, it all came to a head this year. Around May John decided he wanted to visit his family again for the summer since he had quit his job and his plan was to move himself, my sister Stacy and my niece out there, closer to his side of the family. He promised my sister that he would find work but in the meantime would have to live with one of his sisters, her husband and their 5 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. It seemed everything was working out for them when John found a union job in construction but had to wait for the background check to be approved so he can start earning income. But living in a cramped apartment for 3 weeks finally got to my sister and she decided to come back home. My mom and myself had to send her money for gas and John ended up driving her and my niece back. He promised to stay the weekend but ended up leaving the next morning saying he had a side job to do so he can earn extra income to send them. At first he would call daily to talk to Stacy and my niece, but after a week or two the calls became less and less frequent until it was only Stacy constantly calling John for him to talk to my niece. During the 2 months he was out there all he did was party with his friends, getting wasted and living the single life while my sister was taking care of their baby. The union job he had applied for never happened due to him not completing the paperwork because of the constant partying. He continued doing side jobs and would send my sister money from time to time but not enough to help sustain her or my niece. Of course if Stacy needed anything my mom 54F, my other sister Bella 24F and I would help Stacy out without expecting her to pay us back. During this time she felt so alone, especially during the nights where she would stay up with my niece trying to put her back to sleep. Then a month and a half ago Stacy found out through the grapevine that John was hanging out with Heather again and he ended up staying at her place for 3 hours during which my sister was trying to reach him but his phone was conveniently turned off. After a while John finally called my sister back and before we knew it they were in a screaming match with her asking him why he would hang out with Heather at her place for 3 hours with his phone off and him saying nothing happened. They were just hanging out. My sister was hysterically crying and begging him to tell her the truth. And to this day he denies anything ever happened between himself and Heather. Well, 4th of July comes around and we have a little barbecue with just family and a few friends, including our next door neighbors Stephen 28M, Sarah 26F and their daughter 3F. Now John doesn't like Stephen due to him being touchy-touchy with Stacy while they were all drinking back in early April. Stephen's wife, Sarah, knew about this incident as well since she saw Stephen being overly friendly with Stacy through their bathroom window. You could tell Sarah was a little uncomfortable at first but Stacy put her at ease and they began having a conversation. Stacy never took a liking to Stephen and she would always keep her distance from him ever since that incident happened. An hour or so passes when John calls Stacy and during their conversation he hears Stephen in the background talking to one of our friends and he was pissed asking my sister why Stephen was at our house and Stacy explained that he just showed up unannounced with Sarah, which he did, and that she was mostly talking to Sarah and her other friend. He began yelling at her through the phone accusing her of trying to be with Stephen, which she was not. My sister finally got tired of him accusing her of cheating so she ended the call and had to shut off her phone because he wouldn't stop calling. After that incident John became more reckless with his drinking and began drunk calling my sister numerous times throughout the night. Of course my sister still cared for John but at this point you could tell that she already checked out of their relationship. She finally called it quits with John a few weeks later saying he can stay out there with his friends and to not come back home. That's when it finally clicked in John's head that this was serious and he wanted to get his family back. But my sister's mind was made up. She finally got tired of his BS. After she called it quits she began to flirt with a few guys over text which never came to anything due to long distance until she ran into an old high school acquaintance Michael 23M. Now Michael always had a thing for Stacy but nothing ever came of it because at the time he was too shy to ask her out. Stacy noticed the changes in Michael and how he was more confident in himself. They began to catch up and he told her that he was involved in a vehicle accident a few years back that almost left him paralyzed and he knew he was lucky to be alive. Well, due to the accident, he was given a decent payout to where he was able to buy his own home, own some land and also purchase a motorcycle. They then kept in contact through Messenger and began to spend some time together riding on his motorcycle and just hanging out. I of course didn't know any of this was happening until one night my sister and I were drinking and just having sister bonding time. She then asked me if I could keep a secret. Y'all know where this is going. She then went on to explain that she had slept with Michael the night before and how it was the best she's ever had. I don't want to go into too much detail, but she said she loved how strong he was during the act and how he was able to do things that John never did with her. I asked her if she ever communicated her feelings to John and she said she always did, but he never listened or took the time to make it pleasurable for her. She said, with Michael was more passionate and intense and she loved how he took control. Of course I was in shock, because all this time I thought she was hanging out with one of her female friends. Then she went on to say that John texted her saying he was coming back next weekend for a visit and to not say anything to him because even though she called it quits, he's refusing to believe that it's over between them. She doesn't want to hurt his feelings because she still cares about him. So the weekend comes and John shows up at our place. My sister didn't really think he was gonna come, but he did. He said that he was able to make a decent amount of money and saved almost $1,000, which he ended up spending most of it on my niece. He noticed how indifferent Stacy was towards him and he tried winning her back, but she wasn't having any of it. I guess he noticed some changes in her because while he was waiting in the car he ended up looking through her phone and was able to retrieving deleted messages between her and Michael. And when I say messages I mean, John was completely gutted. When Stacy got back in the car he confronted her and asked who the F is Michael. My sister then admitted to John that she slept with him because she knew in her heart that their relationship was over. John began screaming and hitting himself all the while my niece was in the backseat crying. Stacy was telling him to stop because he was scaring their daughter. John then got out of the car, took my niece out of the car seat and went back into the house where he found me and my other sister, Bella 24F, talking. He then asked me to hold her. At the time I didn't know what was going on, but I could tell he had been crying. He then went on to say that Stacy had cheated on him with some guy named Michael. And if I could take my niece for a little while so he can gather his thoughts. I'm ashamed to say this, but I acted shocked when he told me. I went on to say no way, Stacy would never do this to you even though she shared her secret with me just a week before. He then told me how he was able to retrieve their deleted messages and found their explicit conversation. Stacy then came into the house yelling at him saying how it's none of our business and to keep me and Bella out of it. John just kept crying asking her how she could do this to him. How she could break their family apart. Stacy yelled back that he was the one who abandoned his family to party with his friends. And she told us not to feel sorry for him. John then left the house and got back into his car and took off. Stacy also left with her daughter. 10 minutes later I get a call from my mom telling me that John went to her house. She then went on to explain how he was crying saying Stacy had cheated on him with another man and how hurt he was. My mom reminded him how he spent 3 hours with another girl, Heather, and didn't answer any of Stacy calls. How he just left her and his daughter to go party with his friends. And how he can't put all the blame on Stacy cause she did tell him it was over. He then went on to say how he never cheated on Stacy with Heather and how they're just friends and were only chilling together. My mom called him out on his bull s. I guess he couldn't take the truth so he just left. John ended up sleeping in his car that night. The next morning he seemed fine and he began to apologize to me for the way he acted and how he shouldn't have gotten us involved with his relationship to my sister. I feel really guilty for keeping this secret from him. You can call me a coward, but I still never told him that I knew. So Reddit AITA for keeping my sister's secret?